And hello, and welcome to another episode of the Full Quota Podcast. My name is Mpho and I've got Tim DeLace here. This is your number one South African cricket podcast. We talk all things South African cricket. Remember, we do have a weekly One Day Cup roundup. We did tell you yesterday that we're going to do a podcast previewing the test series down under. We're going to be doing that today, but the podcast yesterday talks all things CSA One Day Cup, and Tim's team is sitting at the top of the log, which means I'm not necessarily the happiest of man, but yeah, they're just taking names down there in the Western Cape and Newlands. Tim, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, mate. All good. Can't complain. Test cricket around the corner, and as you say, province on top of the log. So couldn't be happier. even Tom Brady getting smashed yesterday couldn't dampen my mood.
Okay. Yeah, like you surprised us at Newlands. I was like, wow. Okay, cool. So today is the test series preview. We're going to be talking all things about the Proteas down under, but we've got the Australian perspective from Menas, who is the host of the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. He'll be telling us all things about I think they are our number one foe, a number one enemy, but I don't think they consider that. But we're going to talk about that anyway. Let's just bring Menas on and have a conversation. Hi, Menas. How are you?
Great, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I think it's like an hour to midnight, so we're going to not keep you for too long, but thank you very much for joining us.
An absolute pleasure. I heard you saying that, that Australia might be South Africa's number one foe, but Australia's number one foe is not South Africa. Maybe that's true, but certainly there's no fiercer rival when it comes down to the contest than when Australia plays South Africa. It's, some of the toughest cricket I've ever seen. So I'm looking forward to the test series. It's about time Australia actually won against South Africa at home. It's been far too long, and time has come.
Yeah, look, the time has come for that not to happen. We're still gonna keep that record. But that's why you're here. You gotta let us know how things are, because the last time these two teams played, it was that situation that happened. People lost their jobs. There was a lot of sandpapers everywhere, and obviously the team's moved on. It's 5 years, I think, yeah, since that, and now we're going to Australia. Do you think it'll be as intense as it was 5 years ago? Is there a level of revenge that the Aussies want to have for everything? Because India was blaming Supersport, so I would assume Australia would also kind of follow on that route.
Well, I mean, look, I don't want to get into all of the sandpaper stuff because we'll go down a rabbit hole, because everyone was to blame. But just on this series coming up, I actually think the heat will be taken out of it. What happened in 2018 was a build-up of years and years of a bitter rivalry. Australia had gone to South Africa and won pretty much every series on South African soil. So, there was a bitter rivalry on both sides. South Africa was desperate to win at home with their, for AB de Villiers and all those players that weren't going to get another chance. And it turned out to be a spiteful, intense series. But I can guarantee that under the leadership of Pat Cummins, the spice and will definitely have come out. It won't be as fractious. I think relations between the teams will be better. I think you would have seen a lot more of these players play together in T20 comps, so they won't hate each other as much as they did in that last series. I think we'll get a good competitive series on the field with some good fast bowling, but I don't imagine there'll be any scenes like we saw in the stairwell where Quinton de Kock was winding up David Warner, or Rabada was shoulder charging Steve Smith and then taking it to court to try and get out of a ban. Hopefully we won't have any of those shenanigans again.
No, I tend to agree. You want intensity, and you want rivalry, but we don't want things to boil over into how it did in 2018. Just to go on to more on the Australian factor, a lot has changed in the Australian factor. New coach, new captain, new way of playing, a few
Ron
new
Ball.
players. Usman Khawaja's back. So just give us a flavour of where Australia is now and what we can expect in a general sort of sense.
Yeah, look, the batting lineup's as settled as it's been for a long time. There's a few question marks over David Warner at the moment, but you've got Usman Khawaja, who scored 1,000 test runs this year. Then you've got Marnus Labuschagne and Steve Smith averaging over 60 in test cricket. So there you're 3 and 4. Then you've got Travis Head, who's been in great form, and Cameron Green, the big all-rounder, at 6. So that sort of top 6 is pretty settled. Alex Carey's the new keeper since Tim Payne's retirement. He's done very well with the bat and with the gloves, took some fine catches up to the stumps in the last test match. So your top 7's pretty set. And then for the bowling, well, Nathan Lyon and Mitchell Starc and Pat Cummins are pretty much locked in for that first test. But Josh Hazlewood has been ruled out. So it looks like you'll have to face the destroyer that is Scott Boland. So, I mean, you might be worried about, Starc and Cummins are going to come at us with all this pace. I think Scott Boland, like mid-130s, who could take another, triple wicket maiden and knock over your very thin top order.
Look, I think the last time South Africa saw Scott Boland was, I think, in the Ashes that side. And obviously earlier this year when you were playing in the Test series. But tell us a little bit more about Scott Boland and what's so scary about him that we're all going to just, capitulate to this man who bowls 130.
Well, he's actually, he reminds me a little bit of Vernon Philander. Not particularly fast, but just puts it on the same spot all the time. And if there's a little bit of assistance in the wicket, it can, be very damaging. And, what happens when you put it in the same spot all the time is, you're testing good batters' defense. And there was a graph in Scott Boland's last test match against the West Indies where, all his balls were basically landing in a shoebox area. So when you can bowl that accurately, you put a lot of pressure on opposition batting lineup. So that's what he's done. He took 6 for 7 at the MCG in the last Boxing Day test. And there's, a lot of discussion that he has to play in the Boxing Day test against South Africa this year. So I think he'll play because Hazlewood's in a lot of doubt. He's one to watch for sure.
Yeah, I 100% agree. You don't necessarily need to be 140. It just shows if you are accurate enough, you can get wickets at this level. An area of slight concern for me from a South African point of view about Australia, when I was watching the recent series against the West Indies.
So you're not concerned at all, are you? You're not concerned
Not at all.
No.
You don't have to lie. Don't lie for my
everything.
account.
Everything with South Africa is perfect. It's perfect.
Exactly.
It's absolutely perfect.
So don't pretend. I mean, go on. So where do you think we're weak?
Cameron Green. So South Africa don't have a all-rounder in the shape of him. You guys do. But he was less than impressive against the West Indies. Are you a little bit worried in terms of Cameron Green? It's fantastic to have, but I just noticed he wasn't quite in either department, batting or bowling, at the level that I expect him to be.
Look, I'm not concerned. He's a fantastic bowler. He's the perfect fourth quick. So he'll take wickets. There's no doubt about that, especially against your batting lineup. But with the batting, look, it was strange that he wasn't very confident against the West Indies, but he was sort of in a hiding to nothing. Everyone else was scoring runs so easily. So I'm really looking forward to see the way he takes on the quick bowling. It's certainly, you're right to think that maybe there's a weak spot there. If he can get through Head, then you've got Green and Carey. But Green's a very good batter, and I think he'll do well. He actually, I think, will benefit from the sort of challenge of facing your fast bowling. He grew up in Western Australia, so he's used to quick bowling, bouncy pitches, and I actually think it'll suit his game. And he's so tall. I mean, if you're a bowler, you have to sort of hit your own feet to get it up to his head. So I'm looking forward to it.
Well, look, and to a certain extent, for me, when I look at this Test series, it's I think South Africa's bowling has to be the challenge, because we've seen Australia play over the past year. The bowling hasn't been that great. The surfaces haven't been that haven't given us much assistance. And I looked at the West Indies tour, and I kind of felt that West Indies was wasting everyone's time. But this on Friday, you step it up a notch. You've got Rabada, you've got Ngidi, you've got Marco Jansen. You also have Anut Nokia as a four prongs seam attack with Keshav. That, to me, is the best bowling attack in the world. You can argue that your guys are better, but
sure, whatever.
Does that not
pretty good, though,
worry you as the level of quality bowling that your top six is facing?
Definite concern. So, Warner and Khawaja are 35. So, facing that extra pace will test their defenses. I'm not worried about Smith and Marnus. I think that's really good. I think Head's pretty good against the quick. So I'm not too worried. Certainly it's going to be more challenging than West Indies or England have thrown at us in the last 2 summers. And I'm really looking forward to it. And I'm also a bit worried with the South African batting. What tends to happen on tours here is one or two batters that, haven't really done much. All of a sudden, when they come to Australia, just break out. And all of a sudden, they're batting like Bradman. You're like, who was the one that put on the big partnership with Dale Steyn? Anyway, at the MCG.
Turkey too many.
Yeah,
Turkey too many.
He's hopeless. He had one good tour. And he killed it. So, that's what I'm worried about. There's nobody's with the bat will actually come of age on the tour, because the good pitches for South African batters. Ball comes onto the bat nice and hard, good bounce. Like Australians are used to those conditions. So, be a little bit less seam movement, which I think helps. So that's my concern. And the clash of the bowling, though. I mean, I cannot wait. I'm going to the SCG test, and I'm really looking forward to seeing those two quick attacks.
So at the SCG, you're going to see Tim's best friend, Simon Harmer, the world's best off spinner who's never played international cricket. He's going to light you up.
Hasn't he taken like 800 first class wickets in county cricket or something?
Yes, and he's our backup. So, yeah, good luck.
Yeah, good luck.
So,
right.
so Tim, let's talk South Africa a little bit. I want to move us into our biggest worry, the one that keeps me up at night. Well, the test match will keep me up at night because it's starting at like 2 a.m.
Doing this podcast with Tim.
Yeah, our batting. Obviously, Dean Elgar spoke about the bounce in Australia is a lot more truer than South Africa. You can trust that, but our batting hasn't been great. We beat India without anybody scoring a century. But we don't have Keegan Peterson. Timber's back, but we all have spoken about Timber's struggles with the bat. You've got Kaya Zondo, who's new. Ryan Rickleton's at home. I can't even pick a top six. But how does South Africa navigate this Australian bowling attack?
Exactly how Manus explained. It just needs one person, two people, to make a big score. Occupy the crease, go through that earlier period, which is not going to be easy. I have no faith that we're going to make 350 in any test match. That doesn't mean we can't do it, because as Manus said, the faster pitch, less lateral movement does give us a chance. But on what we've seen over the last 12 months, I can't sit here and go, Dean's definitely going to make 100 in Australia against Stark and company. He made 100 in the warm-up game, fantastic. But no disrespect to those bowlers, they're not of the level that he's going to be placing at the weekend. So my issue was the batting. That doesn't mean he can't do it. And Tinnis, we know Tinnis, hugely talented individual, has the ability, but I'm not sure that we're going to be able to do it in this series. I hope so. It comes down to batting long periods. That's what it comes down to. If they bat for long periods, 2, 3, 4 sessions, we've got a chance. If we don't, then it won't matter what our bowlers do. It won't matter. Bowling Australia out for 200 won't matter because, as we saw against England, the batsmen will falter. So, if we back up with our batting, we win the series. But I don't know if we're going to.
So, Tim, who are the two batters that you think will come out with a 8-year contract as a Proteas Test batsman for the next however long?
Sarwell has got to do it. Sarwell has got to do it. Sarwell's got to do it. Well, he's playing in the Test match. Sarwell has to deliver.
I thought you'd tell me like Cal Verena or Dennis Brain.
No. Sarwell, because Sarwell mentally has it, in my opinion. Okay, he's failed in the warm-up games. Mentally, he has it. I don't know if Tinnis has it mentally. That's my worry. He talks a big talk. He says he wanted to be the number 3 after the 100 against Sri Lanka 3 years ago. Didn't step up. He didn't step up at all. I think Sarwell could be that guy for the next 5 years. But he has to do it. Yeah. That's the thing. Wow. He has to do it.
I'll have you the next 5 years. Wow. Okay. Menace, when you look at our batters, our batting lineup, what obviously doesn't strike any fear in you, I would assume, but who's the one guy you would want Australia to circle their name on the board to be like, that's the guy? If that guy doesn't score runs.
Well, I mean, I look at the batting lineup and I think, who the hell are these people? Like, all the other players are off playing in T20 comps or living in England or Australia now, so there's not many left. But the ones that are left, obviously, I think Dean Elgar's got to hold it together for you guys. You need some solid starts. It doesn't have to be massive hundreds, or that'd do great. But someone at the top of the order needs to just blunt the new ball. So the middle order can do something. I mean, Rassie van der Dussen, I've seen play a few times. I think he's pretty handy. But yeah, Elgar for me, Australians traditionally like to target the opposition captain. So, if we can knock Elgar out literally or just get him out, either one, then I think that'll do really well.
Look, I'm worried about Mitchell Starc against Dean Elgar. I'm worried that if he can get that ball to just swing a little bit late, Dean's going to find himself in trouble. And we've also got obviously this new opening partnership. And for me, Tim, Sarwell, if Sarwell can sit with Dean for a 50-run partnership, that's okay. You need some sort of a foundation. We can't be, like last year when we were like traveling the world and we couldn't even get like 10 runs and like our number 3 was coming in at like with 2 runs down. So for me, that was that's it. But looking at this at the surfaces they'll be playing on, obviously they'll be slightly different as they go through.
I can tell you a lot about them.
Yes, so Brisbane on Friday, Minners. What's Brisbane traditionally like? And if you win the toss there, what do you do?
Well, usually it seems around a bit. It's a little bit green. There's a good movement, a good bounce. So it's a tough one. It can be tough to bat in the first session, but once you get through that sort of first session, if it's good weather, it can sort of bake the pitch a bit, and all of a sudden it gets easier to bat. Now, a gutsy move for South Africa would be to win the toss, and if there's a bit of green in the pitch, throw our top order in there and throw your quicks at us and try and knock us over, because I think actually the Gabba is probably your best chance for a victory. The MCG can be a bit slow. The SCG is a dust bowl. So if you win, it won't be a quicks. It'll be Harmer and Maharaj that do the damage. They actually maybe reverse swing. That's your South African specialty. So maybe there'll be some reverse swing at the SCG. But yeah, so I think the Gabba's a big chance. And, gutsy move is to send us in. Obviously, the famous story here is when Nasser Hussain did that in the Ashes on the first day, and Australia were like 2 for 360 after being sent in. So I think, though, with your quick attack, it's not Andy Caddick and Darren Goff off half a dozen steps. You might actually make it a bit more tough for Australia.
Yeah. Good point. I have to ask about Steve Smith before we wrap this up. So Steve Smith, I think I read somewhere that his worst average is against South Africa. It still isn't bad, but I think it's his worst
like 49?
opposition. Yeah,
And
in
everyone else
the
is like
40s. But yeah, it's not exactly bad as such.
Well, it's better than the rest of all our batters.
But what I wanted to ask is his changes. His changes in his starts. Do you know why that came about and why that happened?
Yeah, so interesting, Steve Smith did the press conference at the end of the West Indies test because he was the captain, and he did say that his record against South Africa is a bit lower than some of the others, and I think that will be playing on his mind. So, he'll be keen to make some big scores and improve that. With his technique, so he got into the habit of moving a bit across the crease, getting a little front on, and he was playing onto the leg side a lot. And he just got into, I guess, he was so good, and it was just so easy for him to just move across and whip it away on the leg side and turn the strike over. And then a couple of years ago, I think it started with the Kiwis. A lot of teams started to just block up that area and bowl that line, just, angling into him. And he just, there was no gaps in the field, so he wasn't scoring as quickly. And his run rate started to dry up. So what he's done this summer is he's gone to less of a trigger movement. He's staying more side on. He's not moving across the crease quite as much. He's still got a slight movement, but very little. And he's now opened up the offside a bit more. So it's harder for opposition attacks to tie him up. They didn't really, they weren't getting him out, much better, but they were just slowing him down. So actually wasn't churning out big hundreds. But so now he looks more side on, and you don't see him quite move across the crease as much.
Yeah, look, there's another one I want to talk about.
You talk about whoever you want.
Well, yes, but it's the South African in your side who no longer considers himself South African. Even changed his name or the pronunciation of his name.
Minus Labuschagne.
Yes.
On my podcast, we spent about 6 episodes just getting his pronunciation right, because there was this thing when he came onto the scene that, the real sort of commentators that like to think they're really smart would dig in and go, it's Labuschagne. And, they would be, really on to that. And they thought they were so smart. But Marnus kept saying, no. We're in Australia. Just call me Labuschagne. We've got Josh Philippe. He's another player who plays in the Big Bash. We call him Philippe because, it's just as if Aussies are going to learn the French accent. Bugger that. And, go on.
So it's his first test series against the Proteas, and obviously it's a country of his birth and everything else. But he's playing like he's the Rock of Gibraltar, unmoved. It reminds me of, I think Steve Smith mentioned, I think in his book or in one of these little things that he does on TV. Steve Waugh, sorry, about how obviously he narrowed the shots that he had at the start of his international cricket career to just become as consistent. Is Marnus on his way to being an Australian great? That's one. And two, is he going to suffer against the South African barrage, or will just this rock continue? How does South Africa get him out?
It's a good question. So, firstly, I mean, his trajectory is to not just be an Australian great, to be, one of the greatest batters of all time. He's averaging over 60. I think he's the second fastest ever to 3,000 test runs in terms of innings and matches. So, I mean, he's breaking all the records. I mean, I think he's played 30 matches and scored 10 centuries. That's a phenomenal strike rate. So, look, we've seen a lot of batters, storm onto the international scene like this, and then, opposition attacks start to work them out. So, there's a lot of challenges for Marnus to come. We go to India next year. We go to England next year. So those conditions will test him. Against South Africa, I'm pretty confident that he matches up pretty well with your attack. He likes good quick bowling. Maharaj is a good bowler, but he's not devastating. And on Australian pitches, he won't get a lot until we get to Sydney. So I expect Marnus to do really well. I think when he went to South Africa on a one-day tour, he scored 100. So yeah, I think he's going to do well.
Yeah.
Is it like raining there or something?
It's raining in my part of the world, in Cape Town.
Cape Town. It was raining in Johannesburg earlier today.
Apologies for that.
No, we had a thunderstorm here earlier today, and our power went out, and I was really worried it wouldn't be back in time for me to jump on this podcast, but it is. So you get me.
Okay.
Load shedding in Australia. That's a new one.
Yes.
Yeah. So, men, I think we're getting to a point where we're going to now start talking about predictions. The first thing I want to ask you is, who's going to be that player for you that needs to perform, or that you will predict will perform and effectively win the series for Australia? Because I'm assuming you were going for a whitewash, right?
Look, I wouldn't be surprised if South Africa steals a test match. I mean, I really wouldn't. And, I think there's actually a chance that you could swindle the series because you've got that bowling attack that can take 20 wickets. And when you've got that, you can win test matches. But I think for Australia, you're really looking at someone like David Warner as your danger man. He hates you a lot. He's got a score to settle. His career's on the line. So, he's someone that could come out and just start smashing you all over the place. But I think that 3 and 4, when you get Marnus out, then you got Smith. And that's a sort of really tough top order to get through. So that's who they have to win it for Australia, because I think if we put scoreboard pressure on your batting lineup, that's how we'll, win the test matches.
Yeah, Tim, from a South African perspective, who are you expecting to win us this series? Who needs to perform, or who do you think is the one who's going to come out at the end as a man of the series?
Well, as I said earlier, as much as our firepower with the bowling is going to be important, if we want to win this series, somebody with a bat is going to have to stand up. That's it. We saw that in England. It doesn't matter what we do with the ball. Somebody's going to have to stand up with the bat. So I'm not going to go with Dean because Dean's done it time and time again. I'm going to go with Cyril.
Okay.
Cyril's been under a lot of pressure recently. He made that 73 in England, but apart from that, he's been a little bit short of runs. Again, because of the age, people are starting to say, well, maybe he's too old. Maybe we need to go with somebody a bit younger, a bit fresher. The pressure's on Cyril to say, I'm here, and I'm here for the next 3 or 4 years. This is his series for me to make a statement. It's going to be Durban-like pitches, which is where he's home. But I do think he could. I do think he likes hitting square the wicket. He does like hitting square the wicket, so I do think he could do well. If he gets himself in, if he gets to 30, I think he's got a very good chance of making good runs. If he does that, South Africa have got a good chance.
Yes, and from a team composition perspective, what's your balance? 6-5, 7-4?
I think they're going to go 7-4. What I've heard from Lagerfeld, I think they're going to go full pace attack, apart from Sydney. I've got this funny feeling they're going to say to Keshav, sorry, but we need to get 20 wickets as quickly as possible. Wow. And they're going to go 7-4.
That's a mistake.
That's a mistake. So Jansen's going to play.
Well, interesting.
What do you think of that?
I still think there's a lot of players in our team that are vulnerable to good spin bowling, especially in that middle order. Head, Green, to a lesser extent, Carey. So even, Marnus and will sometimes get himself out to spin bowling. So, yeah, I would like, if I was South Africa, I would have a spinner in there. Because Maharaj has got a good test record. So I'd pick him.
They could go with the 3-pace bowlers at the spinner. It's just when I heard him talk yesterday or this morning, it sounded as if like they were leaning towards 7-4, and 4 being pace. Just what we need is pace.
So your 7 batters, Tim, in that would be Dean Sarl, Tennis at 3, Tember at 4, Rassie in the mix there with Verena at 6, and your 7th batter would be Kazondo.
Correct.
Okay. The only problem I have with that is 2 things. I always play a cricket match with a spinner, regardless of where you are. You can have the greenest of tops, like in New Zealand, which they need to get themselves sorted out there. But you always have to have a spinner. So I would prefer they play Keshav and Marco, and just have Marco bat at 7, and just know that your top 6 has to do a job. If your top 6 batters don't score runs, number 7's not going to add much. He might add another 20 or 30. He might add another 100. But you're taking that gamble. And look, my biggest fear is if Smith and Marnus go on like a long partnership, like 150 plus. Having 4 paces is those guys are going to be like broken by the time the second innings comes, and that's my worry, which is why Keshav kind of eases the pressure a little bit.
And that's actually the role Nathan Lyon plays in the Australian team. Often it's not just the wickets he takes, but it's the fact that he can bowl 15, 20 overs a day, go for under 3 runs and over, and they can rest the pace bowlers, and then they can come back fresh. So that is a very real tactic that's useful in Australia, where it's hot and players can tire out.
Yeah, no, that's true, Menace. I think one final thing for us is the World Test Championship. Do you care about the World Test Championship, Menace?
I think more and more. I mean, I really enjoyed the final last year when New Zealand beat India. I think it's a great way of adding context to Test cricket. Is the Test Championship perfect? Not really, but I think it's getting better, especially now that COVID's over and we're getting back to more regular touring overseas. So I quite like it. I think Test cricket needs a championship. It needs to have context on every game, and even these games against the West Indies, which it didn't mean a lot, but for the World Test Championship, it was really important for Australia to win well and get closer and closer to that final. So I care about it. I'll care a lot more if we beat South Africa in the final next year at Lords. That'd be great.
I'd love to see you in the final. we're literally holding on to that second spot.
We just need to win one test. We win a test match in this series with there, I reckon.
Yes.
Yeah.
So all the Indian fans watching, sorry. This is like a prelude to Lords next year, where it's just gonna be like, there I'll go with 4 paces. And I hope Australia does too, because that'll be fun to see the world's best fast bowlers going at it. But you're going to see we're going to see all of those guys in the next couple of weeks. The beloved Boxing Day test in Australia is now back, as well as the New Year's test for the South Africans. I'm really excited, Menace. All the best to your team.
Thank you.
All the best to your podcast. I'm sure you're going to have lots of content in the next month on the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. So please do check him out there.
We've actually been storming up the charts in South Africa over the last few months. I don't know what happened. Like, I even said on one show, like, South Africans are the worst cricket fans in the world, as a joke. Obviously, I'm joking.
We're spying on you. We're trying to figure out who the Scott Boland chap is. Because we know who Marnus is. It's just Scott Boland. We're just so afraid of him.
Well, you should be. You bloody should be. He's the most unassuming bowler in the world, and he'll just knock you over.
I just don't want that situation that Vernon had at Newlands where we had you out for like 45, and
Yeah.
it was just all him.
Yeah,
So
good
that
memories.
can't
Good memories
happen.
for you. You know, I could because it's very late here. I was trying to watch some videos to keep myself up, and I decided to watch videos of South Africa exiting World Cups. So
Aye.
so I was lucky enough to be at the 1999 tie at Edgbaston. I was there for that match. I don't know if you.
Oh.
So I got to storm the field when Donald was trudging off, and then I watched 2003 Pollock getting the sums wrong. And it was just great, honestly. Like, I thought I was going to fall asleep, but I was all of a sudden perked up and like.
And then you watched 2022 when South Africa decided to stink up the joint.
And 2015 against New Zealand. I mean, so much fun, honestly. It's great.
Don't worry. We will be watching all those previous test victories in Australia. And to add, I think it'll be our fourth time. Because we've
that's right. No, you've won the last series.
Yeah.
We've won, I think, the 5 of the last 9 in Australia. Test matches.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, test matches for sure. And I actually started back for me when I was at the SCG 92, 93, maybe, when Fani de Villiers stole a test match on the last day in your first tour to Australia. So, you always see fantastic cricket. And I actually think that the Australian public aren't giving this series enough kind of, they're not building it up enough because, South Africa to win 3 series in a row over here, that is phenomenal. Like, no other team has done anything like that in the last 30 or 40 years. So, not only should we be a bit nervous, but we should also be like, it's actually time to win at home. So, I can't wait. Thanks for having me on the show. Love the South African, love's a strong word. Some of you are okay. That's all I'm willing to say.
I hope we are part of the sum.
We'll take that. We'll take the sum. We'll take the sum. Thanks, Menace.
Thank you very much. Have a great evening. Goodbye.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Awesome. That was Menace out of Australia, just giving us a little bit of a taste of this Australian team and what we're going to expect. Tim, you said the keys to it. So essentially, that's it. We need to, bat for long periods. It's the same thing. Effectively, actually, guys, go watch that England preview podcast.
It's the same. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. The only difference is here that the ball is not going to be moving around as much. So technically, it should be possible.
And there's no Glasgow, so
it should be possible to do.
Final day things that are happening in Pakistan. Which is pretty cool, by the way. I actually like that. It's great test cricket. So yeah,
it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Tim, test match starts on Friday, the 16th.
Friday. Yes.
And you'll catch it on usual things. We'll be taking the UK feed for this. Actually, I don't know. But yeah, please do. We'll be back talking about the test match. Probably on Tuesday. We'll probably do 2 podcasts next week, actually. A one-day cup recap, because that's still going on, and then we'll also be doing a test review. So enjoy the cricket. Hopefully the Proteas. I don't know, Tim. Do you want them to bat first?
I want them to bat first. I do. Despite what Mana said, I get what he means, and he's right. But I'm thinking that that's the same thing. It's just in my back of my mind permanently. I want bat first, score 400. That's what I want. We do that, then. We've also got Old Trafford in our as well. So I just bat, please, just bat. Prove to us that you can bat for long periods of time.
Okay, we'll leave it on that note. Proteas, prove to us that you can bat. Outside of that, thank you very much, Tim. Have a lovely day, and everybody enjoy your evening. Goodbye, good night, and besale kakafiso.